Good evening. We apologize for the delay. We had a bit of a glitch. We are back in action. We've already taken our Pledge of Allegiance, but I will again call to order the action session of the Board of School Commissioners for Thursday, April 30th. As I said, we have done the Pledge of Allegiance. Our meeting is again being conducted via video conference pursuant to Governor Holcomb's Executive Order 20-9 to minimize the risks associated with the current public health emergency. This meeting is being live streamed via IPS Facebook page and may also be accessed via the IPS website. A Facebook account is not required to view this live stream. Mr. Mohan, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, President O'Connor. Commissioner reminder just to turn your mics on when you're speaking. Commissioner Arnold?
Here.
Commissioner Gore?
Here.
Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Slack?
Here.
Secretary Collins?
Here.
Vice President Hawkins?
Present.
And President O'Connor?
Present.
President O'Connor, all members are present.
Thank you very much. We'll now adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Reviewing the agenda, are there any requests for changes to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the agenda? And a second.
No move. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. Moving to section 3, opening comments. Does any commissioner wish to offer opening comments this evening? Hearing none, we will move on to the public comment section. As of 3 p.m., I think there was only one written comment. Zach, am I correct on the student comments? And are we addressing that now or later in the board meeting, Zach?
Correct. We received one public comment in the form of a letter from a student from CFI 70. Superintendent Johnson, do you want to reference that now, or would you do that during superintendent reports?
I'm happy to reference it. Now.
Why don't you go ahead?
Do commissioners have access to that letter?
I don't know. Yes, I do. It's on board docs. You go to board docs, you can access it through there.
Correct. It's posted to board docs, but you may just review the content and then we can discuss as necessary.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Was it in our board report?
Commissioner Gore, it is now posted on board docs in public comment, and then it says public comment submitted electronically, and I'll just describe very quickly what it is, and then you all are welcome to go back and take a look at the work of one of our students, Amari Williams. He is an 8th grade student at CFI 70, and he has addressed school board members with an interest in addressing the district's uniform policy. And had a recommendation around an adjustment to one part of our uniform policy. And so I will read his second paragraph specifically where he is advocating for a shift. So he says, although my choice would be no uniform policy, I would like to address the following IPS dress code. Hooded items must bear the official school logo. Do you know how much school logo hoodies cost? At least $25. Students who come from families with limited income cannot afford to buy these hoodies and then can never wear a hoodie in school. I propose that the district's uniform policy be adjusted to allow students to wear hoodies of choice that are school appropriate, or plain hoodies be acceptable as a part of the uniform policy. And then he goes on to talk a little bit more about the dress code and some of the rationale we have for our dress code. I've spoken with Mr. Williams's principal, Chris Collier, and advised her to have him submit his recommendation to the board. The administration is willing to take a look at that part of our policy and have a conversation and to come back to the board regarding that particular part of our dress code policy, if that is acceptable to the Board of School Commissioners.
And that would be something we would address as a board prior to the beginning of school in the fall, assuming that that happens.
Correct.
Any questions for Superintendent Johnson regarding that single public comment or that issue?
It seems like a reasonable request, well spoken.
Yeah, I second that and agree. And thank Mr. Williams for his advocacy. Look forward to next steps.
Yes, it's always nice to see students coming before the board. I think it's very powerful when students articulate their ideas and their thoughts and their concerns. So very much approve of moving forward.
Thank you all for that. And definitely if Amari is watching, thanks to Amari for his advocacy and making sure his voice is heard. Great job.
And perhaps if we return, hopefully throughout the summer, not that I'm predicating anything, but maybe as you prepare that as an administrative recommendation to the board, Mr. What's his last name? I'm sorry, what was Amari's last name?
Williams.
Mr. Williams can come and address the board with regards to that issue. I look forward to hearing from him. Moving on from that, moving to the consent agenda review. The items, I don't think anybody offers or anybody else any comments on that issue. Hearing none, we will go to the consent agenda. Reviewing the items included in the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments?
Commissioner, President O'Connor.
Hearing none, do I have a motion to? Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I just wanted to flag in the personnel report, Mr. Wayman, who's the head custodian at CFI 70. Just want to thank him for his service to School 70 as well as IPS, as he is set to retire soon.
I think we were going to make some kind of statement about the Arlington Woods.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Collins. So just want to note, make sure commissioners are aware, there are a number of resignations that you will see connected to Arlington Woods Elementary School. If you recall, 2 months ago, I think it was, you all approved the transition of Arlington Woods as an innovation school. And so those resignations, because they will no longer be formally employed through IPS, will now be employed through the nonprofit. They have to resign as a part of that process from IPS to then be rehired back into the school. Principal Henderson is also on that personnel report, and then a number of the staff who will be making that transition with her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins, for reminding us of that. Any other questions or comments regarding the consent? If not, do I have a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any further comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Commissioner Gore, I was a little quick on my any opposed. Yours was an aye. Yes, I assume.
It was.
Thank you.
So we have
great.
that motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'll record the vote.
I'll now turn the agenda over to Superintendent Johnson for superintendent reports.
Great. Thank you, President O'Connor. There are 3 superintendent reports to be presented this month. Item 4.01 is an update on our COVID-19 response. Item 4.02 is our regular quarterly finance update that will be presented by Chief Finance Officer Weston Young. And then item 4.03 is an item regarding updated administrative guidelines related to electronic communication. I'll give you the update on our COVID-19 response. I have been so proud of Team IPS and our efforts over the last 6 weeks. And it's incredible to think that it has been that long already, that we have been out of school since March 13th. And so that commissioners have a sense of the work that has happened, the incredibly hard and diligent work that our team has been doing. wanted to provide that update to you all, as well as our community who is tuned in this evening. We continue to provide meals at 16 school sites and 2 apartment communities across the district on Mondays and Wednesdays, with service including breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have served since March 13th more than 240,000 meals to our community. That includes IPS students, although it also includes non-IPS. So any student or child under the age of 18 is welcome to take advantage of that meal service, and we want to be sure our community knows that. We've continued to partner with Gleaner's Food Bank in offering family-sized boxes of non-perishables to families on Mondays and Fridays, and we've served approximately 50,000 families since that effort was underway. And so I certainly want to shout out our food service team under the direction of Scott Martin and Dina Bond for their incredible work in figuring out ways to continue to up our capacity to respond to the need that we find in our community. I'm very, very thankful for their leadership and their efforts during this time. As it relates to our academics and home learning, really excited. Hope you've turned on channel 23 at some point one morning, because from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. you will find IPS educators who are presenting lessons aligned to the K-8 home learning materials that we mailed home to families. And so that will air from now until the end of the year, where students can tune in to see that programming that is particularly was designed to support our families who do not have internet access. We know there are a number of families in that situation, to make sure that they still have an additional entry point and support around the materials. So a big thanks to Circle City Broadcasting, owned by DeJuan McCoy, who was a former IPS student, for their partnership in getting that broadcast going and the work that they're doing to support us. Our May home learning materials are getting mailed home this week. I think Commissioner Hawkins just received one of his packets of materials for one of his students in grades pre-K through 8. And so we'll be moving from a calendar of 3 home learning days, which is what it was in April, to 4 in the month of May, Tuesdays through Fridays, with Monday being for staff preparation and work time. We'll be asking the board to formally approve that adjusted calendar a little bit later in the meeting. We are also have lots of plans underway for the celebration of the class of 2020. So please stay tuned for updated information around that. We've convened a small group of seniors and had 2 meetings with them to help give us ideas on how to create those celebrations. And then they're working with their individual school communities about the ways in which they'll celebrate their achievements. So very excited to still create something very special for our seniors in the weeks ahead. In terms of our technology distribution, as you all know, we are distributing as needed Chromebooks and devices to our high school students in credit-bearing courses, as well as our middle school students in credit-bearing courses. To date, we have distributed 3,723 Chromebooks to students who have had a need. We also ordered our first order of MiFis, or those individual hotspots. 916 of those have been distributed to date to support our students who need connectivity in their homes. So again, continuing to find ways to support our students and our families of being able to access learning even as we are away from each other. And I'm very encouraged by the work that our teachers and staff have been doing to communicate with students and families to stay engaged and stay connected during this time. We are also partnered with AYS Incorporated. We've been partnered with them for a little bit over a month for childcare for essential employees. And so those efforts are still underway. To the extent possible that we are being a good community partner, that is what we have kept at the forefront of our work at this time. And then we have our community also supporting us. And so excited for the resources that we'll be able to leverage moving forward. The IPS Education Equity Fund launched a few weeks ago. We are at nearly $400,000 to date in that fund, with major gifts from Salesforce and Chiefs for Change, as well as other gifts from Apex Benefits, the Indianapolis Colts, Cincinnati Bell, and LDI Limited, along with members of the executive team and the board who have continued to be supportive of this fund. So those funds will allow us to support immediate needs and more rapidly respond to those needs as we learn of them from schools, to support our e-learning efforts as we are moving to a 1-to-1 device ratio, and the professional development that will be necessary to make that transition, as well as when we get to the recovery on the other side of this crisis, we know that there will be needs that emerge. So that fund will help support our efforts in all three of those areas. And then we'll also be a beneficiary of the Indianapolis e-learning fund. And so that's a group of organizations and philanthropic organizations that come together to support all public schools across Marion County and meeting e-learning needs. And we'll be the beneficiary of about $246,000 to support our needs in that area. So very thankful for the ways in which our community has continued to rally around district, our schools, our families to be supportive. And to that point, we have launched an e-learning task force to support this move to 1-to-1. We know that in the fall, we need to be able to be very nimble and flexible and prepared to exist in both a virtual home learning world and also a, hopefully in our school facility world. And to do that well is going to require each of our students to have access to technology. And so we'll be moving forward with a 1-to-1 device ratio, with iPads provided for our students in K2 and Chromebooks for our students in grades 3 through 12. And again, we're very excited to have that device strategy in place. I know Commissioner Moore is overjoyed that we're making this transition, and excited to really make sure that technology becomes an integrated part of the learning that we're doing in the district, but also give us the flexibility we need to respond during these times. So I will stop there in terms of our updates around our COVID-19 response. But again, just want to highlight how incredibly proud I am of our district in the work that we've been doing.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, great.
If there are no questions, I'll move us to the second item, which is item 4.02, and turn it over to Weston for the quarterly finance update.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson, and good evening, Commissioners. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Hopefully all of you can see it. Can I get a thumbs up from Mike? Could you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? And can you hear me okay?
You're on.
Great.
And I can hear you. You're about 1,000.
Awesome.
You're the Hall of Fame.
Tonight we're going to share a quarterly update for Q3, quarter three of the school year 1920. We have our general categories and reviews that we typically have done through our board appropriated funds, our cash balances, our supply diversity. We'll also do a deeper dive into our budget updates. And then at the end, have an opportunity to share about the impact of COVID-19 on school finance. I've invited an advisor to the district, Jason O'Neill from Policy Analytics, to join us, and he'll be sharing some of his materials with us tonight. And those are included in the deck. Also, I just remind those joining us live stream, there are financial reports available on our website. You can go to myips.org, Central Services and Finance, and you'll find financial reports dating back the last decade of IPS's historical financial activity. The first slide we want to highlight is our board appropriated funds for the first 9 months of the school year 1920. This is representing only the expenditures in millions. Revenues are not reflected on here. We want to highlight that the funds represented here include the education, operations, and operating referendum funds, including all the debt service funds. You'll see that the expenditures for this first 9 months are greater than both budget and the prior year. These represent the education fund, where the expenditures are supported by the operating referendum proceeds received from the referendum passed in November 2018. We've had expenditures related to the collective bargaining increases that raised our teacher pay retroactively back to the beginning of the school year. And then our general and special education funds also do have a 3-pay month in the month of January. So we do see an increase in what is reflected in the actual year versus actual expenses versus the budget. Our innovation network payments have increased year to budget and year over year due to the additional students in new grades and also additional schools approved following a budget approval last year. And then our educational supports areas have increased because of the increased focus on social emotional learning. Within our operations funds, which would be the capital projects and transportation funds, those are in line with budget. We see some small decreases in transportation through those first 9 months. We'll highlight the impact of COVID-19 on transportation and facilities and later in our conversation. The administration expenses I'll note, are lower than budget. And then our debt service funds are lower than budget, where there's a timing difference in the first payment of our capital referendum that was later than anticipated. We actually closed on the debt later, on the issuance later than anticipated. And we also have an impact of refunding bonds in April of 2019, where the taxpayers saved over $10 million over the life of the issuance. Again, more details on these expenditures can be found in the financial reports on myips.org. The next slide highlights some of the revenues incorporated with our education operations fund. We want to note a couple takeaway points that the operations fund is funded by property taxes, and those property taxes are received on a semi-annual basis. So the revenues that are reflected in here for the operations fund are basically half of the expected revenue received during the year, while all of the expenditures, both in the education and operations fund, are 75% of the expected expenditures or 9 months of the year. We also have the total net cash flow represented. We want to highlight again the impact of the operating referendum, where last year at this time, an operating deficit of almost $30.6 million was represented without those operating referendum dollars. With the operating referendum dollars this year, we've cut that deficit in those 9 months to 18.6. Again, it's a deficit for this portion of the year because the operations revenue is received every 6 months. That should neutralize once we have the June 30 property tax payments received. We also want to highlight that the operations fund revenues, while they are just 6 months represented, they are above budget, and that's because we did close on 2 buildings and sale of 2 properties earlier in the year, the John Hope School Building and the Meridian School Building at 1820 North Meridian. Next, we want to talk about the cash balances. And this is where we want to spend some time because right now cash is king. IPS is positioned well to navigate this recent, historic, and severe COVID-19 economic impact. Indiana as a state is better positioned, in my opinion, than many other states due to its healthy reserves, yet it will face increasing cash pressures due to the ever-changing economic environment, which funds our state revenues through primarily sales tax and income tax. And then we look at IPS, I believe IPS cash reserves are in place to endure the uncertainty surrounding the global economic activity and the state and local funding decisions that are yet to be determined and decided in the next legislative session. IPS, and I believe that for 3 reasons. 1, IPS is in the 2nd year of its operating referendum and not in need of going back out to voters for renewal, similar to other surrounding districts in the next 1 or 2 years. The second is that IPS issued GO bonds in 2018 prior to the November 2018 referendum in order to be ready for potential catastrophic cuts at that time, which would have needed to be made if the operating referendum had not passed. And thankfully, the operating referendum passed, And we have right now the luxury, I'll call it the luxury, to have delayed deployment because of our conservative approach to, one, releasing the funds while making some strategic investments this school year related to compensation, and two, developing a long-term facilities plan, which is a sustainable and meets the community's needs for the foreseeable future. Last reason why I'm confident being IPS's position to navigate the COVID-19 economic impact is because IPS district, the business economic activity in that district and the property tax values, regardless of the TIF considerations, is more robust and innovative than many areas around the state of Indiana. And also that we've already strategically connected across various industry sectors to support education in the IPS geographic boundaries. The next slide projects out the 2019 cash flows at the end of our school year, ending 6/30/2020. The projections continue cash balances in line with the IPS fund balance policy, represented by the percentages in the far right column. Projection across our funds, IPS will go into next fiscal and school year with at least 1 month in reserves, or greater than 8%. The projections as of April 2020 reflect anticipated savings and operations due to the COVID-19 economic impact and the closure of school buildings. I think the significant items I would raise are that are leading to this decrease in costs include transportation, where there is a reduction in the home to school expenses, the extracurricular activities that would have taken place, the field trips that would have taken place. And when we're looking at facilities, significant decreases in utilities, and then also the delay in timing of our facilities projects. From last quarter to this quarter, our net cash flow has moved from a negative $2 million over the course of these funds to a positive $9 million. So we believe there's significant savings in the short term, in the immediate short term, to report out and to conserve at the end of this school year. I want to highlight our supplier diversity, and we've reported this on a calendar year basis the last number of years. And last quarter we highlighted on average an 11.4% annual spend of our eligible expenditures to minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. In our first 3 months of the calendar 2020, we experienced a decrease in the amount of district spend to certified minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. But IPS believes the continued investments made in schools through facilities improvements and contracted services primarily, the remainder of the calendar year will continue to be closer to the average annual spend. What is displayed now is a repeat of what we've shared during the February and March timeframes when we've talked about the budget for 2021. We've highlighted some of the work that our team has done to serve students through the 1920 school year. During that time in 1920, we're kind of looking at it in two phases. There's the pre-COVID-19 phase, and then later on we'll talk about the post-COVID-19 phase. Pre-COVID, we shared that the state tuition support was stable. It was known for those this year and next year, and that we were looking at the highest enrollment since 2013. And that pre-COVID-19, the global and local economic activity continued to support strong local real estate values and state revenues. And we were highlighting many of the strategic conversations and decisions that we've made and the board has made this last few 9 months. Compensation, curriculum, textbook adoption, our technology and digital curriculum supports, our facilities optimization that's underway, our pilot with Indigo, and also our engagement with USDA on our food service waiver. That was pre-COVID-19. And as we talked about in the budget development, was a cash flow projection that showed the cash balances in education operations and operating referendum with the stated major assumptions, took our cash balance out to the 2027 timeframe. But now that we know that just as of today, Another 4 million people were reported with first week unemployment claims, raising it to the same time we've been in home learning status. Over 30 million people have lost their jobs across our nation, and that will have an impact. And so how will that COVID-19 impact our assumptions when projecting cash flow into the future? We look at now in the post-COVID-19, just the immediate time frame that Superintendent Johnson highlighted just before me of the COVID response and all the activity that's been happening. That is literally activity in 5 to 6 weeks that has taken place and has been supported through the budget of 2019-20. That was not represented and reflected in the budget development process. These are conversations that have hopefully stabilized our district and also those in our community. During that time, school buildings have been closed through the end of the school year. We recently learned today we have a shelter in place through 2 more weeks, May 15th, and that has a drastic impact on our ability to support our schools and our district. We've had home learning required, and we've deployed resources for that. And during the global and local economic activity, we've seen it named the Great Lockdown, where it's impacting the operations and cash flow of families, businesses, organizations, and governments. We've seen from purchasing a number of materials, whether it be masks, gloves, technology, that supply chains for essential materials are depleted or delayed significantly. And that state revenues are significantly decreasing at a historic rate. These stabilizing conversations, decisions have led us to 4 key areas of support that I want to highlight. Continuing to pay IPS staff and contractors through the end of the school year, keeping the cash flow going for families, collaborating with organizations to distribute food and supplies to our community, and provide childcare to first responders, and then also to distribute technology devices and learning packets to our staff and students. And the biggest one that has been the challenge for us, but we're also overcoming with great support and collaboration and engagement with partners, is advocating for equitable access to the internet. It's one thing to distribute the technology and the device, but if people can't get onto the internet, that's going to be a big impact to our school populations. When we're looking into the 2020-21 school year, we're hoping to adapt and optimize our processes. We're looking at legislative funding. 2021 legislative session will really be key as we head into the future years. But as we look to 2021, the student mobility is a really big challenge and opportunity for us. We see students moving and addresses being changed every day. We see an economy that we are unsure of the timing of its recovery, whether this dip is an immediate return to the normal, or if it's a U-shaped format with a delay, a quarter or 2 delay, or a return, but then a dip again in a W fashion. So the V we all hope for recovery may be there, but most likely it's going to be a U, and potentially even if it's a U, it's going to be a W, a return to potentially a need to address that. So we've had strategic conversations to adapt our curriculum and instruction. Previously on this slide that I would have shown to you, it would have said textbook adoption. I've shifted to say curriculum and instruction because we're significantly shifting towards a digital access and digital support model. We also had technology refresh. Well, it's technology and connectivity, both at home and at the school. Significant conversations to adapt and optimize for the next school year. We also highlight that in development, we continue to see our facilities operations assessment occurring, even with delays in getting in buildings. Our transportation partnership is still in place, ready to go for next school year. At the same time, we're onboarding our new contractor. And then with food service, working through the needs of our families, working with gleaners and other citywide partnerships to get food out to our families. One item that has been a big support for us as a district is to know that there are dollars coming in from the Federal Stimulus Act, the CARES Act that was passed in March of 2020. Over $21 million was allocated in that act to the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund for IPS students. And these dollars are allocated through the Indiana Department of Ed at a rate of about $16.5 million to the IPS local education agency in our non-public schools, and also another $4.7 million to the Innovation Charter Network schools. The application process is expected to be open next week, and there's an opportunity for reimbursement of expenditures up to those amounts through 2022. The great thing about these funds is that they're fairly flexible. They're the flexible use for any activity that we believe is needed for helping out students take care of their basic needs, but also on the education front. And then a second part of that CARES Act was the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which is at the full discretion of the Governor of Indiana, and has opportunities to support the needs of our students. This is something that has not been laid out in full, and we anticipate an opportunity to receive funds from that fund as well. I want to highlight and introduce Jason O'Neill from Policy Analytics. At the October 2019 quarterly finance update, Jason shared an overview of IPS's property tax forecasts. And at that time, global and local economic activity had been expanding and improving for the past decade. And a small portion of the presentation referenced the question, what happens if there's a recession? And now that we are experiencing the great lockdown recession in the recent months, Jason hopefully will provide an overview of the current economic outlook and the impact from COVID-19, the implications of COVID-19 on Indiana school funding, and the implications for IPS related to short and long-term revenue and expenditure planning. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Weston. As Weston said, my name is Jason O'Neill with Policy Analytics, and privileged to address the board this evening. I just want to provide an overview of what can be expected to the extent that we know of upcoming recession or future downturn in the economy. We do know that the social distancing practices, the stay-at-home order, those things are having an economic impact. We see that in our schools, we see that in our communities, and so schools should be preparing for some sort of a likely recession. There's not yet enough economic data to know what the duration or the magnitude or the scope of that is, though there's some leading analysis that is going on there. But we do have an idea of the timing of when a recession would impact school revenues and where we would expect those impacts to occur. There will be a lag between the time economic downturn occurs and when it will affect school revenues, and it's important to understand how those things will play out. So we go to the next slide here. This is just some background on the 2008 recession, which was the most recent recession in the economic cycle. In terms of U.S. personal income in 2008, we saw about a 3% decrease in total personal income. Next slide shows the impact on employment as well. If you look at employment, we saw about a 6% decrease in employment. And so those are pretty significant one-time shocks in the economy. We do know that there's an employment impact that's occurring now with people out of work and businesses shut down, and so we can expect some level of this in the future. If we go forward, we can see that there's three major areas where a recession will affect school finances. First is in the tax base, the assessed value for the property tax supported funds. That's the operations fund, referendum fund, and debt service funds. A reduced growth in the tax base, or in some circumstances, a reduction in the tax base and overall market value of property will lead to increased circuit breaker impacts. It will provide limited growth in the operating referendum fund. If you remember, the operating referendum was approved at a maximum rate. And to the extent that the tax base does not grow, then it limits the growth in that operating referendum fund. And then it provides less debt service capacity for a given property tax rate. Another impact is limitation in the maximum levy growth quotient. Now, this is a kind of a technical inside baseball property tax term, but essentially the allowable growth in the operating fund levy is limited by state statute to a factor that's based on a 6-year rolling average of non-farm personal income within the state of Indiana. So what that means is that the growth in the operations fund levy is tied to the growth in Indiana non-farm personal income. So as income growth slows or incomes actually decrease in a recession, that impacts the rate at which the operations fund levy can grow. And then finally is tuition support revenue. This is the education fund side. Tuition support decisions are made by the Indiana General Assembly on a 2-year budget cycle, and those policy decisions are dependent on state sales and income tax revenue that comes into the state, and obviously reductions or a shortfall in those types of revenues will impact long-term tuition support revenues in the future. So if we go forward, we can see some detail about the timing, because this is important as well. The impact of a recession doesn't impact school finances immediately. That's especially true in property tax revenues. And that's because in Indiana, property taxes are paid in arrears. So the economic activity that's occurring right now will affect property values, but that effect will be recorded in the property tax system as of the January 1st, 2021 assessment date. So you pay taxes even on your home as of the assessment date of January 1st, 2021. And taxes paid or taxes based on that 2021 assessment date will be paid in 2022. And so the economic impacts that occur now will first begin to affect taxes paid in calendar year 2022. Now, there are potential short-term impacts. One is that one of the executive orders waives late payment penalties on property taxes paid for 60 days for most property taxes. And so there could be late payments coming in even this calendar year. And obviously, if there's an economic downturn that's of a great enough magnitude, then a portion of taxpayers will be unable to pay their property taxes in the given tax year, and that could cause a short-term impact as well. But by and large, the impacts on the tax base of any recessionary activity during this year will be first felt on the revenue side beginning in 2022. So if we go forward one slide, you can see how this worked back in 2008 with the 2008 recession. The recessionary period on property values within IPS taxing district was in calendar year beginning in 2008 and shifting through 2010. But you can see that there's a lag on when the actual assessed value for the payable tax year occurred, a 2-year lag there. And we would expect to see the same sort of lag in a recession this year. Now, it's a little too early to tell what the magnitude of those impacts could be. In 2008, that recession was heavily tied up in mortgage-backed securities and subprime markets, and so had a disproportionate impact on the housing stock. We don't yet know how this recession will affect property values, either residential or non-residential, but we can estimate that there will be at least some impact there that will be felt beginning in the 2022 tax year. If you go forward to the next slide, this is just a little bit more detail on the maximum levy growth quotient. And really the takeaway here is that a 1-year reduction in personal income in the state of Indiana affects the maximum levy growth quotient. That's the allowable rate at which the operations levy can increase for over a period of 6 years. And so even a short-term, a 1-year impact in personal income does have a long-term impact on school revenues. And as we see and understand how personal income is going to change within Indiana, we need to begin projecting that impact forward over a 6-year time frame. Next slide shows property tax rates in maximum allowable rates and collections over time. Beginning in 2020, you see that blue bar on the bottom is the operations fund, and that's the portion of the property tax revenue base that would be impacted by changing growth quotients or changing allowable levy growth. And then going forward again is state tuition support. This is obviously a major factor for school finances the majority of the education fund operations. You can see the history of state tuition support over time, including a reduction over the 14-15, 15-16 time period. Again, these decisions are made for a 2-year biennium budget. So beginning in the next legislative session, there'll be budgetary decisions made about how much funding can be allocated to the state tuition support formula. Reduced tuition support growth will definitely have an impact on the operations fund transfer as well, because it affects how much money can be transferred between education and operations. And also, prolonged disruption in the economy could have implications for future enrollment levels, which would also affect tuition support revenues. So to summarize here, the impact of a recession on school finance is not immediate. At least the majority of the impact is not immediate, but preparations should be made in the short term for those coming in impacts. Long-term cash flow projections should begin to account for reduced revenue growth and reduced revenue availability. Schools may need to enact cash flow strategies. Weston just spoke of this when he was talking about fund balances in the short term, so that balances can be built over the long term to mitigate recessionary impacts. This should affect your operating referendum fund, your education fund, and your operations fund as well, because there's contingencies in each of those funds that could be affected by the referendum. So as we get more information, more financial information and more economic information comes in, we'll know more about what the potential size and scope of a recession could be. But that doesn't mean that steps can't be taken now to begin preparing for what that situation looks like in the future. So I'll turn it back over to Weston to sum up some of those priorities.
Weston, I think you're still muted.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate the reminder. So thanks, Jason. Appreciate your analysis and your support to our district. The COVID-19 has impacted the global economy in a quick, drastic, and historic way. I believe we've all recognized that in our own personal lives and our own finances and our own situations. And we've tried to relay that the assumptions that we've been talking about for 2 or 3 months during the budget development process are in need of review and revision. And that regardless of the revision and the review that's needed, the district continues to strive to develop a sustainable long-term financial model to support its changing and ever-changing academic priorities when it comes to how we do our work. These key decisions that are both outside our district with the legislature and the economy and internally will impact our long-term cash flow planning. So at this time, open up for questions. And Jason's also, I think, will stay on the line to answer questions if needed as well.
Weston, thank you. Before I get to questions, I want to say, having participated as a member of our finance committee, the point of this is we're in a good place to deal with changes that are occurring because of the work Weston and his team have put in place over the course of time, because of the work we've done to make sure we have sustainable finances. I do think we all are going to have to look through, as we make decisions in the future, through the lens of knowing that there will be, if you think about the sales and income tax amounts of money that come to us because of the changes implemented at the state level with regards to property tax caps and other things that we can anticipate, just knowing what we know about the economic impact of this period of time we're in, that those dollars are going to diminish significantly. And we need to, as a board, working with Weston, working with Superintendent Johnson, be prepared to make some very conservative, very difficult decisions about preparing for those cuts and dollars and cents as they come in the 18 to 24 month period we're looking at. Do any of the other board members have any questions for Weston?
Yeah, President.
Michael, oh, I'm sorry, Evan.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask about the Weston. You said that we would have a month surplus. I think I understood it that way at the beginning of the school year. But is that impacted if we have summer school? And I just wonder if that's impacted if we have summer school.
So I'll give from the finance angle, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so from the finance angle, there's a couple ways that summer school has been supported in the past and will continue to be supported in the past. Each year when we have summer school, we are able to submit for reimbursement for those expenses. So there's a special line item for summer school within the education fund. This year, depending on how much is actually spent for summer school will depend on what that reimbursement will be. So the more we spend, the more reimbursement we would get. I want to also raise the needs that you're raising about summer school and the transition and the additional supports. This is where I think the conversation may be within the academic team and the administrative team to recommend use of the CARES Act dollars. So these are, if we're going to have these transitional moments of additional expenditure to summer school, the CARES Act dollars are coming in and could be allocated for that as well. So in addition to the reserves we have in the education fund and the summer school additional reimbursement we expect, what could support us even if we have to extend it to a greater extent than even what those revenues allow, we do have the CARES Act and other reserves to support that.
Sorry.
Oh my.
Is that a question?
Whatever you said, Weston, tell him you're sorry.
Is that your Fido joke?
Commissioner Hawkins, you had a question?
Yeah, just two questions. One is really a follow-up to the CARES Act. So I just wanted to confirm that in our projections that are posted on board docs, the CARES Act dollars are not reflected, or are they reflected at all in the 20 or 21 projections?
They are not reflected in the projections.
Okay. And then the other question is a property tax question, which, forgive me for asking this, but I understand that for the governor that there have been deferments or delays in property tax payments. And so I guess it'd be helpful to understand a little bit more sort of what the impact on the district, what that actually means timing wise. If everyone decides to pay or is able to pay by July or June versus May, sort of how does that play out knowing that we're on a July 1 fiscal year?
Weston, I think you're still muted.
Thanks. Yep. Thanks, Ev. I noted it before, but thank you for the reminder. Evan, the question you have about property taxes, Jason O'Neill did mention that in his comments, and we can dive into that deeper now, and also during the conversation about the resolution that's later in the agenda and agenda item 6.01. So the fact of the matter is, if the taxpayer does not make their payment before June 30, there's less likelihood that IPS and all the other school districts in the state will receive those property taxes. About 25% of the taxpayers in the IPS district pay via escrow, and so we're expecting at least those to come in on a timely basis. But those who pay outside escrow and say, hey, I can wait 60 days and not make a payment, have a penalty, that's a likelihood. And so our team has looked at our cash flow. The key piece of this is that we do not anticipate significant decline in the total revenue received that's expected during that time frame. Whether we receive it June or in August, we believe the dollar amount is not going to be significantly decreased. At the same time, that timing difference causes us to have some cash flow considerations. So one is we need to make sure that our reserves in the debt service funds are sufficient to make the debt payments. And if they aren't, and in this case, they may not be, but we've got resolutions on the board docs to allow for transfers from operations fund to support that as an interfund transfer to support the debt service funds and then be paid back once those property taxes are received in August. We also have in that resolution authorization to utilize our rainy day fund. So to basically have it as an internal line of credit or loan for ourselves to sweep dollars over from the rainy day fund to our debt service funds to pay for the needs of our debt service payments in the case that the property taxes are lower and allocated to our debt service funds. We also have tax anticipation warrants at our disposal. In the resolution in 6.01, we are asking for authorization and giving us the opportunity, if at all needed, to seek tax anticipation warrants through the Indiana Bond Bank. These three options, one being the operations fund that is on the screen right now, that $46 million, a portion of that we believe would be available interfund to support those debt service funds. And also on the external side, the tax anticipation warrants would be an option. We don't feel that we're at risk of missing our debt service payments. If anything, our teams evaluated it pretty deeply, worked with the city. We understand when and what the cash amounts are reasonable to be expected and the reasonable amounts to be received. And we think our plan puts us in a good footing, even with the governor's opportunity to delay tax payments without penalty.
Thank you.
Weston, I have a question. This is Commissioner Arnold. Can you look at attachment 51 in the presentation and kind of tell me, I know we've had this conversation before, and I know it has to do with how the state is likely to change funding, but can you tell me how that kind of plays into the impact that we'll have on our funding, if any?
Okay. Yeah, a great question, because I think to Commissioner O'Connor's point that there are some state revenue considerations as we head forward into the 2021 legislative session. For 1920, it is my understanding for this school year, it's very unlikely that a payment to IPS from the state would be delayed or decreased. So I'm pretty confident that the funding coming from the state will not be decreased for from now until June 30. For next school year, I'm looking at some of the statements that the budget director of the state has made, basically saying that the appropriations that are allocated to schools, the dollar per pupil, which some of the schools represented here, that's what we're talking about. The dollar per pupil would go as planned. So right now, an IPS, we're allocated $7,250 for next school year. The budget director is saying there is no plan to change that. However, in the same press conference, in the next sentence, there's a big but, and it's that if revenues shift significantly and dollar and cash reserves are depleted at the state level, there is an opportunity. There's a potential where dollars would be decreased. And so I think you look at how the state handled it in 2009. If we were supposed to get 12 payments for every student of our district, and this is not just IPS, this is just across the board, school districts only received 11 payments in that year. And so that is something that is kind of, I'll say, the worst case scenario. And we have basically a month of reserve in our rainy day fund. And so we've specifically prepared ourselves for that scenario that has happened before in our state. When we look at 2021, I think you have to look at, again, how quick is the economic recovery going to happen? Is it a V-shaped recovery? Is it a U-shaped recovery? Or is it a W at some point? And I think we're going to see from the state's point of view, when they do their revenue forecast in later summer of this year, and also in potentially re-looking at it again in December of this year, looking at the legislative session. I mean, I think you could, right now, nobody has a crystal ball to know that. And I think we have to know that if the COVID-19, if the shelter in place, if the health risks do not subside quickly, the 30 million that are unemployed is going to continue to grow and have a lagging, impact on our economy. And to start that up is going to have such an impact on income tax and sales tax. And our state is really, really dependent upon those two types of revenues. Schools are funded from the state for our operations. And so we have to have a keen eye of hearing the statements, understanding how those decision makers are making those decisions, because the state can't pass dollars to schools that it doesn't have. And at the end of the day, conservative estimates on state tuition support and conservative estimates on property tax value, assessed value, as Jason outlined, are probably going to be the way we go about our planning the next 2 or 3 years. And that said, we've been focused on efficiencies. We've been focused on transportation facilities, operations, trying to keep as many dollars going to the classroom. So I think we're positioned well to execute on those. We've got analyses and assessments happening, but your point of bringing up this, an IPS is going to be potentially, when you look at equity, it may be impacted more than other districts. And I think the impact may be we lose more than other districts, because I don't see enough districts. I don't see many districts raising their numbers next year in the next legislative session. It's going to strictly be because of state revenue projections that the state is reliant on.
Thank you.
Any other further questions for Weston? Weston, thank you very much. Thanks for all the hard work and to have put us in the position we're in right now to at least be able to make decisions ourselves about to look to continue building into the future.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Weston, and thank you to Jason from Policy Analytics. It's always good to know we have another partner helping us to review our data and think through implications. So thanks to Jason as well. The third item 4.03, is an item regarding our updated administrative guidelines related to electronic communications. Because we are now operating in a virtual structure, we wanted to ensure that we have updated our administrative guidelines as it relates to communications electronically and on virtual platforms. So to support these efforts, when we launched our home learning plan, staff members completed a Safe Schools course around boundaries and appropriate boundaries in an online and virtual environment. But you will also see those administrative guidelines that this provides some updated guidance around communications, professional, non-professional, personal versus professional communications as it relates, particularly between students and staff. We will activate another Safe Schools course with a review of these particular guidelines for staff members to take so that we can ensure employees are aware of their responsibility as it relates to these guidelines. And nothing for board approval, but wanted you all aware that we are ensuring we're being responsive to the contact right now. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Superintendent Johnson, any questions for our superintendent?
No, thank you. I appreciate your nimbleness in addressing the changes that are ongoing with all of our electronic use.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we'll continue to, make sure we're paying attention to. So thanks to Mindy and her team for the work they did to respond so quickly. There are no items in unfinished. Oh, go ahead.
I just had a quick comment. From going from an environment where we discouraged communication via electronics between staff and specifically teachers and students to now depending on that relationship, it's a great shift. And so
That's
I really
right.
appreciate all the work that's gone into, looking at all that. We do make ourselves more vulnerable, but it's a necessity for us to be able to do what we have to do and to remain in contact. And I believe you told us on Tuesday that we have communicated with, we think, at least 85% of our student population. I know that there are some schools using Zoom and having Zoom, not only class Zoom meetings, but also entire school meetings. My granddaughter attends Edison, and she said she's met students online through the school Zoom platform that she didn't get to know when she was actually going to school with them. So I think that there are challenges, but I also think there's lots of opportunities, and I really appreciate the effort that's gone into it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So no items in unfinished business, but 5 items in new business. Item 6.1 is a resolution explicitly affirming the board's support of military families. The Indiana Department of Education, for the first time, is conferring a Purple Star school designation for schools that have displayed a significant commitment to service members, veterans, and students and families who are connected to the military and the armed forces. And so Shortridge High School is going through the process now of becoming a Purple Star designated school and want to be able to support their efforts in the application process, which will require a resolution of support for military families from the board, which I know we have, but we will now explicitly, or you will be explicitly communicating that support. So we have Mr. Pachter, who's the assistant principal at Shortridge, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Crane on the call and in the meeting to provide any additional details.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson and school board commissioners. It's been quite interesting watching this process on a participant end as opposed to a leader end of a building. But Jacob Pachter, assistant principal, Shortridge High School. I believe in the executive summary, there's an overview of what the Purple Star designation is and just a quick overview of why this is important to us. And then I'm open to any questions or however Zach tells me the process is for that. So as the superintendent said, Purple Star designations are relatively new in Indiana. They're probably only, from the research we can do, about a decade old across the country, and they started in Ohio. It really is a joint partnership between the Department of Defense and Departments of Education to really support military families, especially those families who are relocating during and after enlistment. At Shortridge, the JROTC program, which we're thrilled to have, Lieutenant Colonel Crane's leadership in, has about 100 students in it. In the past 2 years, we've had more than 6 students enlist in some branch of the armed forces. We expect to have somewhere between 3 and 5 this summer. Shortridge Cadet Jackson is the first ever recipient of the National JROTC Essay Contest last year. We had 8 cadets participate in the JROTC Leadership Challenge, and we have 6 staff in the building who are military veterans or connected in some capacity to the military. The Purple Star designation will be a benefit to Shortridge and IPS in terms of raising our commitment or re-highlighting our commitment to armed forces and the military, and to their families who are oftentimes trailing the enlisted members as they move from city to city. And Ron, I don't know if you want to add anything or if I missed anything or where we go from here, Zach.
No, Mr.
Lieutenant-
Packer, I think you said everything quite eloquently.
Thank you. Commissioners, if you have questions, if not, the administration will request your approval.
This is Susan.
Do I have a,
I have a question.
go right ahead.
This is either for Lieutenant Crane or you, Mr. Pachter. I'm just curious to know, is the designation for the numbers of students who enlist, or what is the, and I know I read the statement we received, but I'm just curious to know how the exactly specifics about how the school supports military families.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. One of the things that we do in the recruitment phase on the teaching staff is when we see a resume come through that has military experience, at least in the 2 years I've been a part of the hiring process, we almost always interview that person. I think having military experience brings a very unique and interesting and diverse perspective into our building. And I would say that the people I've been a part of helping hire into our building have exemplified the highest standards of both being a retired military and being a current IPS employee. Additionally, every fall, our teachers and JROTC cadets host a Veterans Day Convocation. At that Veterans Day Convocation, the whole school comes together and we honor and celebrate all branches of the military and all active and retired members in the military. Part of Lieutenant Crane brought the Purple Star designation to me. Part of the requirement is a more explicit focus on the school's end of being a provider of resources. So part of the completed application includes the creation of a website that lists specific resources for families. That is not in completion yet, but that will be up and running hopefully next week as part of the application process that will further include the resources that we provide to our military families, both who are retired staff or who are military families who have a child at Shortridge. I can't see everyone's face, so I don't know if I answered your question very well.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would
definitely-
just like Commissioner Gore, I just wanted to know, is this going to be a yearly designation or just something we're doing right now for this award?
Zach, please correct
Is
me
it
if
going to
I'm
be going
wrong.
ongoing? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Commissioner Gore. Zach, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that once a school is designated as a Purple Star school, that designation stays as a Purple Star school as long as the school has kept up with its requirements of being a designee.
That was my understanding as well. I'd probably need to review that and confirm the IDOE website, but my understanding was, again, once the designation is made, as long as you continue to meet the criteria, you keep that designation.
That's how it was conveyed to me as well.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to say that I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Thank you to Shortridge for stepping up and taking this on. I would hope that potentially some of our other high schools might join the process. But congratulations on moving forward with this. I think it's very timely, and I think it's important for our students and for the military community.
This is Commissioner Slack. I agree with that. Yep, I agree totally with that. Thank you, Commissioner Arnold.
Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 7856, communicating the board and the district support for military students and families as presented?
So
move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further, and third and fourth, any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries by a vote of 7-0. I will record that as a vote of 7-0 in support. Is that correct? Anyone opposed?
I didn't get to ask opposed yet, Zach. You jumped.
Oh,
in.
sorry. I jumped the gun. I'm sorry. I'm excited. I'm really excited about the Purple Star designation.
Is there anybody? If not, Zach will report it as a 7-0 vote. Perfect.
Okay. And while Lieutenant Colonel Crane is on, the Shortridge JROTC does a phenomenal job. I follow them on social media, and they are always engaged in competing and supporting different district events. So thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Crane, for your work in leading Shortridge's JROTC.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It's our privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item 6.02, is a resolution supporting financial flexibility in relation to our COVID-19 response. And so you heard Weston talk about the additional flexibilities from a financial perspective, that it will be helpful for us to ask as we continue to respond to the shifting financial circumstances and context that we have. If you read that resolution, that includes flexibility with things like donation of supplies and materials in alignment with SBOA guidance, the flexibility for purchasing specifically in response to this crisis, the flexibility for the interfund transfers that he spoke about just a few minutes ago. So all of those flexibilities, obviously always in accordance with the law, but also in response to and within the context of the public health crisis. So would ask the board's approval of resolution 7854 and 7855 to allow the administration for that additional flexibility. Weston, anything you would add?
I have nothing to add.
And to be clear, the resolution would expire on June 30, 2020 at the end of our financial year, unless extended or terminated by the board.
So, unless there are objections, I'd like to combine both resolutions. So I'll request a motion to approve resolutions number 7845 and number 7855, providing the administration with financial flexibility to address the COVID-19 emergency as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments or questions?
I just think the district is doing a great job in this unusual time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I'd like to
President
say the
O'Connor.
same thing, Commissioner Slack. I think we're doing a great job as a district, especially feeding all the families we're feeding. I think we're doing a good job and continue to keep doing the same job we're doing.
Commissioner Hawkins, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So for resolution 7854, that is to reallocate or shift dollars. Resolution 7855, that is authorization to issue tax anticipation warrants. So that is the consideration or the opportunity to borrow, or if we needed to. I'm saying would, but only if we needed to. Is that, I want to make sure I clarify there are two very different things.
That is what, as Weston articulated, if the state were to delay a portion of or the June or August payments for property taxes in, they would have the opportunity to issue tax anticipation warrants.
Got it. Thank you.
I didn't mean, was there another question? Susan, did you, Commissioner Collins, did you have a question?
No, I just had the mute so I can holler at the dog.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Zach, did you want to cut me off at the pass?
I was tempted to, but no, I have confirmed that we have a 7-0 unanimous vote on approving resolution number 7854 and 7855.
Well, I haven't asked if anybody was opposed yet.
Before we
did it again.
On 7854, I just want to make sure everybody knows that there are 8 items, action items that are approved in that resolution, and 7 items, and just make sure everyone has reviewed and understands the 7 action items that are being approved in that resolution.
We will take silence connoting action. Is anybody opposed to the two resolutions? So Zach, I think you do have the unanimous vote.
Thank you.
This doesn't include,
Susan, you went
This-
mute
yeah.
again. Sorry.
does this include 6.4?
No,
No.
Okay,
item 6, no, different vote.
okay.
Okay, I think I'm good to move us to item 6.03, which is approval of the adjusted calendar for the 2019-20 school year. So as you all know, we have adjusted our calendar to meet the 160-day threshold set forward in the governor's executive order in response to the COVID-19 crisis. And as such, the administration just requests the board's formal approval of the adjusted calendar as presented.
And that includes the change from the 3-day a week to 4-day a week through the month of May.
To get us to that 160-day mark.
Yes.
Okay. Superintendent Johnson, could you
Yes.
explain, this calendar does carry us into 2021, am I correct?
It completes the 19-20 school year.
Okay, it's just our 2020 year here.
Yeah, just this year, because of COVID-19 and the changes we made in the number of instructional days, the board generally approves our calendars each year. So we wanted to make sure that the board was able to approve this adjusted and updated calendar.
Okay, and we're not going into the summer with this calendar.
Correct.
This is just 160 days. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Why do I see something over here that says 190 days? That kind of threw me off. Over in the total here.
Let me look and
And
see.
the summary of days. Do you see in the blue and the total summary of days?
I do. For staff, that's the summary of days for staff.
Okay.
And so for staff, you'll notice there's some additional PD days.
Okay.
And because staff are actually working all 5 days, even in this adjusted calendar period, that's the difference that you'll notice.
Okay. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the adjusted school year 2019-2020 calendar as presented?
So moved.
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded. Any further comments or questions for Superintendent Johnson on that issue? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Zach, I believe
No,
you
Zach.
have a unanimous, you have a 7-0 vote for that.
Thank you. All right, confirming I'm recording a vote of 7-0 on the adjusted school year 19-20 calendar.
Great, thank you. The next item 6.04, includes a purchase agreement for the sale of the Forest Manor Professional Development Center to Forest Manor LLC. The facility ultimately will be leveraged by the Him by Her Foundation on the sale of that facility for the support of their foundation in launching a charter school. And so there is also a resolution attached to this item 6.04 that would terminate our existing lease partnership with Operation School Bell that is operated by the Assistance League, an organization that has been very supportive of the IPS school district. We fully expect and fully support Operation School Bell will be remaining in the facility, but need to formally terminate this lease to allow them to then work out a new lease with the new occupant and owner of the Forest Manor facility. And so the board, the administration requests the board's approval of the purchase agreement and the resolution.
Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 7857, approving the surplus sale of Forest Manor as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments?
I have question and comment. Commissioner Gore.
Commissioner Gore.
Okay. And I don't know if this is the time to say it. However, I think that this is a great opportunity for IPS to make money and to bring in more funds. However, I do have a concern about putting another charter school in that area there where Forest Manor is. And that's because of that, I am, raising an objection to the sale to the Hamburger school. And I don't want them taking more of our IPS kids where I have a fiduciary responsibility. I truly understand we could use the money, but I also feel that to our children, I owe a little allegiance to hopefully keep the children in that area within our IPS district. Because as it is with the epidemic or pandemic going around, we may end up losing children. And I don't want to think that we're going to lose more to a charter school in that area.
I would have to piggyback on what Elizabeth has said, in that I don't want to see a charter school in the east side, another charter school on the east side, and one that would draw students from the existing schools on that side of town. I also have some concerns about the willingness to pay for that building and the extensive remodeling done, and whether that particular charter has the ability or the capabilities to maintain that building. And we have been burned before when a charter has bought one of our buildings and then sold it for a higher price. And so I'm hesitant to jump into a kind of iffy deal, what I see as an iffy deal. So I would not be voting to approve that sale. Nor and the school bell, of course, would stay with us if it would stay with our building.
Mm-hmm. Hello, commissioners. This is Commissioner Slack. Sorry, Mike, are you going to talk?
Yeah, please. I turn your camera though. We'd like to see you.
Oh, no. I'm superintendent. All right, okay. Let's not do that. I would like to say I ditto Commissioner Gore and Commissioner Collins when it comes to the concerns that I have about the building in particular, and about doing another charter school on that side of town. Just really particularly scared about doing a charter school and it failing on that side of town, the east side. I mean, I think our residents deserve better than that, but I'm in between, because I do see that our district does deserve on getting money for a building that we really don't need. So I'm kind of torn between these two decisions. I don't know what I'm going to be voting right now, but I just want the public to know that I am concerned about putting a charter school over there, but I'm also concerned with IPS being in debt to a building that we don't need.
Is Superintendent Johnson, is Scott Martin on the call?
Yes.
Scott, remind me what the deferred maintenance on that building is, which I think was part of what Commissioner Collins was referencing.
Yeah, so an earlier report that we have from 2015, the deferred maintenance is in excess of $20 million. But I think it's important to note that many of the deferred items that are included in that would be intended to replace equipment that is used in the current configuration. So Forest Manor is a open concept school. So let's say the air conditioning, the wiring, the fire systems, those are all the prices that we have are for an open concept school. Him or her intends to renovate that building and add individual classrooms rather than use it as an open concept. And which all of the renovations that we have estimates on would not apply, because they would have to put equipment in specifically and wiring and fire type situations or equipment for every classroom. So the code, the building code is going to change as soon as they start renovations. There are a lot of things that they're going to need to do that the numbers that I've given you don't apply to.
Okay.
There's also a pond right outside the school, and if him by her would have a kindergarten through third grade or second grade, then those children have to, I know the pond is fenced in, but I'm not really sure where the playground is for that school. And I just have a lot of, I'm not really happy about it.
There's not currently a playground there on site, but there is acreage to the south of the property that has old tennis courts and a football field, as well as a softball, baseball field. So there's plenty of green space for them to add playgrounds and whatever, even athletic fields for their when they get to middle school.
And is it a building that we don't need? I mean, all of our coaches are housed there, and if and when teachers have off-site professional development, they go to that building. I don't know what kind of storage is there. That used to be libraries for the teachers to access, but I'm not really sure if that's still true. So is there any indication that we should go to Broad Ripple and use Broad Ripple for the same thing, the facilities that are used in Forest Manor now, moving to Broad Ripple, if that is in our best interest?
Yes, you're exactly right. That is our intention to move those operations, both the math, science coaches, the ESL teachers, move them to Broad Ripple, as well as the function of the Professional Development Center.
And I do think, Commissioner Collins, so we as a district listed that property at the Indiana Department of Education as a surplus property, I believe in either December or January. So we went through that 60-day that it needed to stay posted and made available to charter operators or others who were interested in that building because it was a surplus building for the district. I think, one lesson learned from this pandemic at the current building is everyone kind of has their own office space, even though our coaches spend the vast majority of their time at schools. Mm-hmm. And so the space requirements just simply aren't the same. They can have a home base that is shared and commonly held, which is what we will move to, because ultimately, they are spending their time where they should be spending it, which is in schools.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, I would assume that Forest Manor still has the same setup as there would be like module or places where there may be 5 desks, and the coaches would just have that would be their place where they could do paperwork or mm-hmm. collect, but mostly they were out the building.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, this is Commissioner Slack. I have a question for Scott. Scott, could you please tell us how much are we spending each year to maintain that building? To have our people in that building, how much is our cost for maintaining that building versus our, the cost of what we're going to purchase? They're going to purchase the building for.
So we have 3 custodians in that building. So I would estimate their salaries and fringe at $150,000. And then it's also, we have the air conditioning and heating in that system, I'm going to guess is between $350,000 and $400,000. That's a guess. I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but it would be around that number. Given open concept schools are not as efficient as a typical school, because there's so much volume to heat and cool at the same time. So it's obsolete for us in a way that if we wanted to use it for anything besides the way it's being used right now, it's obsolete for us. We would have to go in and do that same thing. So probably $500,000 easily. To answer your question.
Okay, Scott, this is
That
Commissioner Gore.
answers my question. Thank you, Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Gore, the
Yes.
custodian that we were talking about there, would we continue to have them as our employees? So,
Yes.
would we still have that
Yes.
150,000? We would just distribute them in other areas.
Right. So
Okay.
correct. Right now, we have, it's a really tough labor market. Well, it was before the unemployment rate rose. We use a temporary custodians in many of our buildings just because of the job market. So we have places for them. And essentially, we would pay that. It would cost us a little bit more money to keep them, but it would give us employees of our own rather than contracting for a lower price custodian.
Thank you.
Okay, this is.
I have a question. Tell me a little bit. I know once we listed it as surplus property, then a charter school could have come in and gotten it for $1, and that didn't happen. And
Correct.
now, so I mean, we really, once we listed it as surplus, it was out of our hands of what could have happened to that building anyway. A charter could have come in, paid $1 and taken it and put a charter school in there anyway. Am I correct with that?
You're
Yes,
correct.
that's
Okay, and so that didn't happen, and so now we have someone who wants to actually buy the building and put a charter school. So, and it could have happened under the charter law, the charter school law, that they could have gotten it once we listed it as surplus, and so the results could have been the same either way, that a charter school might have gone in there regardless.
Correct.
that's correct.
Is it listed as surplus?
Yes.
It was.
It was
It
listed as
was.
surplus. It passed, they passed that time lapsed. So no one claimed it off during the period that it was listed as surplus.
I see.
Commissioner Moore, you had a question?
Yeah, I had more of a statement. Thank you. I guess what I was going to say was, my bigger concern was about whether or not him by her could officially finance it. However, it's my understanding that they have a second party that is also assisting them as they evaluate their finances, which gives me a little less pause. However, I think the thing for me too is that him by her is a minority-owned organization that provide a lot of services to youth and various individuals within our community. This will allow them an opportunity to have a building so that they can provide additional services outside of and in addition to the charter school. I guess I must have missed the charter school piece of it, but however, so I will be voting for it for the mere fact that it provides additional resources into our school, where it also allows him by her, a minority organization, to provide additional service and give it a home of its own and be able to do additional things for our community and for our youth.
Great. Thank you. Unless there's further questions, we'll move to a vote if that's all right with everyone.
Sure. Mike, since there have been some concerns or and indications that there's oppositions, I suggest we do a roll call vote on this item.
Sure, that's fine with me. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Arnold?
Yes.
Commissioner Gore?
No.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Collins?
No.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
No.
President O'Connor.
Yes.
The motion carries by a vote of 4-3 with Commissioners Gore, Collins, and Slack opposed.
Great, thank you. The last item, item 6.05, is a resolution authorizing a discretionary moving expense allowance. And so in an effort to ensure that we continue to be as competitive as possible with recruiting talented staff to join Team IPS, this resolution would give the superintendent the ability to offer a relocation expense allowance as a part of our recruitment and then compensation offer for a candidate we'd like to bring on board. It does not guarantee that allowance, but it does give myself the flexibility to offer that as a recruitment and compensation tool. So as such, the administration requests the board's approval of resolution 5272.
Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 5272 authorizing a discretionary moving expense allowance as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments for Superintendent Johnson?
I do, President O'Connor. This is Commissioner Slot. I had a question about this resolution. I was wanting to know, is this for other cabinet members that may be moving and transitioning from different locations? I know we had two new ones, Dr. Henderson and Mr. Morgan, or Dr. Morgan. And I'm wondering, what do those job descriptions look like? And could we have an example of those things before they're like determined, so then we can understand exactly what we're offering?
When you said their job descriptions, or?
No, the actual pay. I know you're asking for extra pay for relocation, right?
Yeah, a relocation allowance that I could offer roles principal and above. Principals, directors, so it wouldn't be limited just to cabinet, though cabinet would be included in that. But obviously, school leaders, anyone in those sort of management roles, this would be a discretionary expense that I could offer.
Is that a certain number, Superintendent Johnson? Is that a certain number? I know we discussed 5,000. Is that a certain number for each person, 5,000?
The language in the resolution allows spending up to $10,000 for relocation. Obviously, there's flexibility there, with the thinking being that someone coming from California is going to have a very different relocation expense than someone coming from Louisville, Kentucky. And so there's just a range there to be able to expend. We don't often have a huge influx of out-of-state candidates coming far, but quite frankly, being able to support folks in making a move oftentimes makes it so that a person can actually say yes and accept the offer.
Okay, one more question, I'll leave it be. So have we given any relocation money currently? Like, have we offered that currently before?
Mindy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and it happened before my time, but yes, we just wanted to, because we had done all the compensation work, we wanted to formalize it as a part of our sort of offerings that I can put in our resources when we do recruit senior leaders, because it's a question we do get. But yes, my understanding is senior leaders have been offered it prior to my tenure.
Yeah, and if I could, I think it was previously we had done it specifically within the employment agreement. So when we executed the employment agreement with particular senior level staff, that was part of the negotiation of that employment agreement. But there was nothing formally within our salary schedule or compensation plan as a district that allowed that, but it was kind of case by case within the individual employment agreements.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gore.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is that how we're going to now operate outside of the negotiation agreement? Just what the needs are? Or is this now set within those parameters of 5 to 10,000? The moving expenses.
I would suggest, and then Superintendent Johnson, look to your answer, but I would suggest, sort of as we've recognized as a board, as we've improved teacher salaries and salaries across the board, that, you know, we've all acknowledged talent is our greatest asset and our most important delivery is students' education. And so as we compete for the talent, I think what Superintendent Johnson is saying, now that we've addressed the salary portion, some of the, you know, we want to continue to compete for that talent. And some, as I think I heard Mindy say, sometimes that question comes up for the senior leadership positions in these education positions. So it's just giving the superintendent another tool to attract the best talent to the school system.
Flexibility. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it would not be, Commissioner Gore, a case where it's set and every single time it happens, but we would know, you know, if someone's weighing 2 offers and we can say, hey, we can support your relocation, that might put us over the edge to get that person to say yes to coming to IPS.
I understand that, and we do need good talent, so I go along with it. Thank you.
I think, did I ask for a motion second?
No. Oh, yes, we did.
Before Zach says it's unanimous, we're going to get do I have a motion to approve resolution number 5272 authorizing a discretionary moving expense allowance as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I know we've had lots of questions. Are there any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Zach, that's another unanimous motion or vote.
Perfect. I'll report that as a 7-0 unanimous vote.
Right, Zach.
We are now at commissioner closing comments. Would any commissioner like to offer closing comments this evening?
There's just one thing I'd like to say, that this pandemic is so overwhelming, and I am sure that our teachers, students, and parents, for them, this has been probably kind of like me, something we've never seen. But it seems that our district teachers, bus drivers, and others have done a yeoman's job along with the leadership. And we really appreciate what they're doing. I'd just like to thank all of them for their continued commitment to the students of our district. Their continued ability to be able to be educated is so important. And with that, I really appreciate all that's going on now within our district.
I would echo those same issues and accolades. I just want to say how proud I am to be part of this district and to be a commissioner, from our parents stepping up to teachers to all of our staff, and especially our administrative team. I can't think of a better leader to have during this time. I mean, the partnerships that have been created are just awesome, and all the emphasis on serving our students and their families in any way possible, and just how proud I am to even serve with my fellow commissioners at a time that decisions are being made, and every day it's a new day and things change daily. So I just want to say how proud I am to be a part of Team IPS and all of the things that are going on, and especially to our superintendent for her strong leadership during this time.
Thank you. Thank you.
President O'Connor, also just want to echo that as well, and thank Superintendent Johnson and the administration and our teachers, and just so many for just supporting and wrapping around the most vulnerable, particularly our students and families. And that's just evident as we think about the Circle City broadcasting endeavor is just amazing. I mean, truly moving mountains there, and the e-learning fund and the educational equity fund and home learning and hotlines and just all these efforts that are taking place are just remarkable. And I made a note of about 250,000 meals served. And so that is incredible. And just want to also personally thank Scott Martin and his team for just creating a logistics plan that is something that probably the city of Indianapolis has never seen. And so just so incredibly thankful. So I just want to thank and encourage and express my gratitude to the IPS community as a whole, and thank our parents and families and teachers so much for what you're doing. And just want to encourage you as we move forward into the month of May.
Okay, this is Benita, and of course, I'm not going to speak long. I just want to ditto everything that everyone has said. It's always been that those of us who have the least have always been able to move up and be able to tackle those things that are most difficult and things that people think that we cannot do. I am so happy to be a part of IPS at this day and this time, as you show Indiana and Indianapolis what can be done. And I guess, with all the bad things that are happening, I am very, very happy that we will now have one-to-one equipment for our students so that they can compete and that they can become very efficient in utilizing computers, as that is what our testing is now being a part of. And so I guess I say that while I am sick of being in the house, and my husband is tired of me being here, I'm happy that we are here because people recognize the need and they came, and for the community of Indianapolis, we truly appreciate you reaching out and helping our children. And Alicia, your staff, and all the teachers, we are so proud of you. Again, I say, I am very, very happy to be a part of IPS.
Hear, hear.
Hello, this is words, Benita.
I would only add. Go ahead, Mr. Slack.
Go ahead, Mike. Were you going to talk? I'm sorry.
No, I just wish I could see you, but I would be happy for you to go first.
Oh, okay. Well, you're not going to see me, but that's great. That wasn't going to work. I'm going to ditto everyone's sentiments. I think that we are doing a great job of partnershiping and collaborating with nonprofits and other entities, and I think that we're really moving the needle. And I want to say I'm very proud of our team. I want to say I'm proud of our administrative team. I'm proud of Dina and her food service team for moving all these meals. I'm so happy for Gleaners for stepping up and partnershiping with us. I think we've done an incredible job here, and I want to continue to see this work pushing on through. I am too. Happy that we have technology advancements, even though as a parent, it's been a little challenging, but I can say that
Here.
I'm having a little tomorrow. But I think that it has really shown us what it truly means to have a family and work together, and know that that we can do this if we just collaborate together and work together and have empathy and grace. So I want to say I think we can do this and keep doing the work we're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. I would only add, and maybe not as a sobering voice, but as I am also proud of all the work we are doing as a school system, what our employees are doing, what our parents are doing. But these aren't without challenges. And one of the things I'm more proud of is that as we've spread technology out, that there are still challenges to that technology. That in fact, while my children can use their technology in the house, that not all of our children can, and that while this disease, this illness is spread, it has a disparate impact on our minority communities, and that in each of those instances, our superintendent has led the charge in fixing those inequities. And so it reiterates to me that we as an organization are led by the right person, and that we then can continue to act to support those things that we know, not just addressing the educational needs of our kids, but that connectivity is helping more families where those children reside. And so I want to thank Superintendent Johnson for not just doing the work, but also being sort of the tip of the spear to address where those inequities arise.
And I'll jump in, and this is Susan Collins. And I want to say that I am impressed, appreciative, and just amazed by the overwhelming teamwork that I have seen in this district through this terrible time. We are the largest district in the state, so I've seen the leadership rise to the occasion. everybody puts their nose to the grindstone, and people are working hard every single day, including weekends, it seems like. And I am so happy that I have such a good company as IPS. Thank you.
Here, here. With that, Superintendent Johnson, do you have any closing comments?
I will just echo the gratitude and thanks that you all have shared. You know, it takes a team and it takes a village to get the work done. And so with me and beside me, we have thousands of employees who are working incredibly hard every single day to continue to support our families. And I could not be more proud to get to have the privilege to lead the district, even through these times. And I'm very thankful every day for my team and for the people who are alongside on this journey with me. I did want to highlight a couple of things coming up. We have our second Parent Institute on Monday, this coming Monday, May 4th. And we'll be focusing on special education and supporting students with special needs. So I would invite the community to go to our website, commissioners to go to the website and to register to take part in that Parent Institute focused on special education, which we know is a unique and particular challenge right now in this home learning environment. So invite the community to take part in that. And to President O'Connor's point, we will continue to be advocates, loud advocates in support of sustained solutions for connectivity for our community and for our families. The digital divide, we knew it existed before, but we see it laid bare in very stark ways now. And I believe we have a solution that exists within our scope and power of our community if we decide we want there to be a solution. And so we will continue to advocate for our families and for the issue of connectivity at this point being something that just needs to be in place across our city, across our community, across our state. So look forward to continuing to bring those ideas and advocacy and strategies that we are engaging in to the Board of Commissioners. And that is all I have.
Thank you very much. We are monitoring, as you all heard the mayor announce today, the city of Indianapolis will certainly stay in our current status of stay at home with some changes, but so we're monitoring any of those changes before we decide to adopt what we will do for our May meetings, and we will obviously publicly notice that well in advance. I think I would anticipate that the May meeting may be an awful lot like this, but we will certainly let everybody know. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Goodbye. Be safe, guys.
Take care.
Be safe and healthy.
Yes.